Good day, everyone. How are you? I hope you and your family are doing well. By the way, I am Mrs. Annalyn Bagdok Garcia of Taburan National High School, and I am your physical science subject teacher. At the end of this week, you are expected to distinguish between carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids, summarize the general characteristics of these biological molecules, and lastly, relate the structure of these biomolecules to their specific properties. Before proceeding to the main lesson, let us first try to define these terms. The first term is monosaccharide. Now from the term itself, mono, which means one, therefore this is the simplest form of carbohydrates. The second term is the monomer, which is a molecule that can react with other molecules to form very large molecules known as polymers. The third term is the peptide, which is actually a short chain of amino acid monomer linked by peptide bonds. The next one is the hormones, which are very special chemical messengers that are created in the endocrine gland. And next is the amino acids, which are organic compounds that combine to form proteins. The next one is the enzymes, which are proteins that makes the biochemical reactions fast. And the next one is the nucleotide, which is composed of three components, and these are the nitrogen-containing base, the 5-carbon sugar, and the phosphate group. And the next one is the phospholipids, which contains the glycerol, 2 fatty acids, and a phosphate group. Let us now proceed to our main lesson, which is all about the biological macromolecules. Now, do you already have any idea about what these macromolecules are? Now, these biological macromolecules are actually large molecules such as carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Now, most of them are organic compounds, and when we say organic, this means these are carbon-containing compounds, and their functional group determines their chemical properties. Biomolecules have a huge variety of functions such as storing energy, protection, and etc. Now be ready for your journey with the different biomolecules, their structures, and functions in your food. Now the first classification of biological macromolecules is the carbohydrate. Now carbohydrate can be broken down into two terms. We have the carbon and the hydrate. Now another term for carbohydrate is saccharide. Now saccharide is actually derived from the Greek word saccharon, which means sugar. Now carbohydrates are classified as either a simple one or a complex one. Now simple sugars are known as monosaccharides and disaccharides, and complex sugars are polysaccharides. Now take note that carbohydrates are the main energy source of the human body. That is why if you have not been eating the whole day, you will feel tired or weak or lapsy. Now the different saccharides that we human beings eat are being converted into glucose, which can then be used readily by our body. However, the excessive consumption of carbohydrates is converted to glycogen, which is stored in our liver and our muscles. Now, glycogen is actually a slow-releasing carbohydrate. Now, let us try to give the difference between monosaccharide, disaccharide, and polysaccharide. Now, the first one is the monosaccharide, which means one saccharide. Now, an example of a monosaccharide is the glucose, which is used in dextrose, blood sugar, and any form utilized by the human body. Now, the next type of monosaccharide is the galactose, which is found in milk and any milk products. And lastly, we have the fructose, which is a sugar found in fruits and honey. And the second one is the disaccharide. Now, from the term di, which means two, therefore disaccharide contains two saccharides. Now, an example of a disaccharide is the maltose, which is actually a combination of a glucose and a glucose, and these are found in malt. Now, the second type of disaccharide is the sucrose, which is a combination of a glucose and a fructose, and these are found in regular table sugar, the sugarcane and sugar beet. And the third type of disaccharide is the lactose, which is a combination of a glucose and a galactose, and these are found in milk and any other milk products. And the third classification of carbohydrate is the polysaccharide. Polysaccharide contains many saccharides. Now, an example of a polysaccharide is the starch or amylose, which is a storage form of glucose in plants. And another one is the amylopectin, which is another storage form of glucose in plants. And the third one is the glycogen, which is the storage form of glucose in animals and is found in the livers and muscles. And the fourth example of a polysaccharide is the cellulose, which is a structural material found in plants. So to sum it up, carbohydrates is composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And its monomer is saccharide, and the main function of carbohydrates is that it serves as the main energy source of our body. Now, the next classification of biological molecules are the lipids or fats. Now, lipids or fats are actually important nutrients in our human body. However, too much consumption of unhealthy fats such as saturated fats, trans fats could lead to heart diseases, obesity, or worse, cancer. Now, lipids also serve other functions such as material for our cell membrane, insulation to maintain body temperature. It also serves as an aid in digestion, and lastly, as signal molecules. Now, there are three different classifications of lipids and fats, and these are triglyceride, phospholipid wax, and the steroid. Now, the lipid family is one of the most varied when it comes to their structure. However, they share this one common characteristic, and that is being insoluble in water. The most common examples of lipids or fats are fat and oil. And they are actually under triglycerides because they contain glycerol and fatty acids. Now let's try to differentiate fat and oil. Now, fat refers to a solid triglyceride which are commonly from animal sources like the meat, milk, butter, margarine, cheese, and eggs. When we say oil, however, these are from plant sources, and these are liquid triglycerides. Examples of oil are from plant sources. This involves the corn oil, sunflower oil, olive oil, and soybean oil. So to sum it up, lipids are composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They are soluble in oil but they do not dissolve in water. And its monomer is the fatty acids. And examples of lipids or fats are fat and oil, and it serves as the long-term storage of energy in the human body. Now let us move on to the next type of biological molecule, and that is the proteins. Now, unlike the carbohydrates and fats, proteins is actually composed of four elements, and these are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Sulfur and other metals are actually sometimes found in proteins. Now, unlike carbohydrates, which are made of saccharides, proteins are actually made up of amino acids. Now, here are examples of proteins. And the first one is the keratin. Now, a keratin is a structural protein that is found in our nails, hairs, and even in our skin. The next example of protein is the silk protein, which is actually found in silk, and this is also a good insulating material. Now, the third example is the collagen, which is a major insoluble fibrous protein found in a connective tissues such as tendons, ligaments, skin, cartilage, and the cornea of the eye. It also comprises as much as 30% of proteins in animals. Now, the fourth example of proteins are enzymes, wherein its major function is to catalyze chemical reactions. Now, examples of enzymes are lipase, pepsin, and sucrase. Now, lipase helps in the digestion of fats, whereas pepsin helps in breaking down proteins into peptides. And sucrase, which is also called invertase, helps in the digestion of sugars and starches. And the last example of protein is the myoglobin, which is a polypeptide that stores oxygen in the muscles. To sum it up, proteins are made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. They are also made up of amino acids combined through a dehydration link called a peptide bond. The protein's monomer is called the amino acids. And the last classification of biological macromolecules are the nucleic acids. Now, nucleic acids play an important role in storage, transfer, and expression of genetic information. A nucleic acid is discovered by a 24-year-old Swiss named Friedrich Mischer in 1868. He found out that nucleic acids contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Now, the most common examples of nucleic acids are the DNA and RNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. The DNA is a nucleic acid that carries the genetic code of an organism. So the RNA, on the other hand, carries information from the DNA to the cellular factories for the synthesis of proteins. Now, if the carbohydrates are composed of saccharides, proteins are composed of amino acids, fats are composed of fatty acids, then nucleic acids are also composed of nucleotides. Now, nucleic acids are also called as polynucleotides. Now, there are three parts of the nucleotide. We have the nitrogen base, the 5-carbon carbohydrate or sugar, and the phosphate group.
So let us now proceed to the structures of each biological macromolecules, starting with the carbohydrates, which is composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And the next one is the proteins, which is composed of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Followed by the lipids or fats, which is again composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And lastly, we have here the nucleic acids, which is composed of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. So that's it. I hope that you have learned something from this week's lesson. And please do not forget to access the link on the screen for your evaluation and performance task output. Again, thank you and be safe.